everyone, this is my review of The Creature from the Pit, the third story of the 17th season of classic Doctor Who, starring Tom Baker as the 4th Doctor. The Creature from the Pit is the 106th story overall, it's 4 parts long and it's written by David Fisher. So the plot for the story is as follows. Making the forced materialization on Chloris, the Doctor, Romana and Kanan become embroiled in the political machinations of its ruler, Lady Adrasta. The lush vegetation of the planet's surface hides a ragtag group of bandits, a giant eggshell, man-eating wolf weeds, and within the depths of an old mining pit, something very large that has a terrible secret which threatens the destruction of Earth itself. So that is the plot of The Creature from the Pit. Getting into this story, I thought it would be a bit of a dull story because from what I heard about Creature from the Pit, it was a mixed bag, but after watching it, I very much enjoyed it, and I would actually say that The Creature from the Pit is one of my favorite Tom Baker stories ever. The production was very good. I liked the set of Chloris, and I would say it would actually rival the Zeta Minor set from the Planet of Evil, and that was said to be very good. I think they included that set in the BBC Handbook of How to Make Sets. I really liked Lady Adastra's castle, fortress, or whatever it was called, and the pit where Hirata was being held. It was very dark and mysterious and scary, and I really liked the atmosphere that went behind that production of the pit. The costuming was actually very good. It was very alien, and I really liked like the face paint and the makeup of Adastra and Karela and some of our other troops. I really liked the bandits' clothing. It was very bandit-like. The script was very good, and the direction by Christopher Barry was very good as well. And this is actually his last story he directed for Doctor Who. I think he had an issues with Tom Baker or something, but I think he was also semi-retired at that point. So I think they called him back to direct this story and a lot of Christopher Barry stories that he's directed before compared to this story, it's very different because the stories that Christopher Barry has directed are very dark and dreary, such as the Daleks, the mutants. I think he directed the Savages as well. A lot of the darker first Doctor stories, and some dark third Doctor stories. But he did direct the first Doctor story, The Romans, which was quite light-hearted, and The Creature from the Pit is also a very light-hearted story as well. So I think he does a very good job in directing some of the darker aspects of Doctor as well as the comedic aspects. As in terms of pacing, I think it was very well done, and there wasn't really any dragging at some point. And I also thought that the plot was also very good. I liked how the Doctor's curiosity over the egg drew attention to address on him, and well, pretty much because they landed in the TARDIS landed in a place called the place of death or something like that, and I liked how the Doctor and I liked how the creature from the pit, Errata, wasn't actually evil because he was pretty much trapped there for reasons I'll explain later, and the real villain turned out to be Adrasta. It was pretty obvious at the start anyway, so yeah. This story had some very good moments, like at the part 1 cliffhanger when the Doctor pretty much jumped into the pit, and the part 3 cliffhanger when Adrasta was being cornered by Erato after the truth of what she did was pretty much revealed, and the Doctor was pretty much like pushing her towards Erato to kill her, and that was a very good scene. It was very well acted by Mara Francis. I also like the story's conclusion when the Doctor prevented the neutron star that was going to destroy Chloris, and with the help of Erato, who actually arranged it. I thought that plot was actually quite cool. On to the performances. Tom Baker, I think he did a great job in the story. Great as well. He does have some great moments to do. I really like the pit and the part when the start of part 2 after he jumped into the pit and everyone, including Adrasta, thought he was dead, but even though he actually told Romana to actually keep quiet and go with the flow that he's actually dead, even though the Doctor was pretty much hanging on the edge of the pit, and he was trying to find his way to climb down because he pretty much ran out of rope, and then he put out a handbook which says how everything easy steps, but it turned out to be in Tibetan, and he brings out another handbook, a Tibetan handbook, when he pretty much translates into keep calm. I actually loved that part. It was quite funny as well, classic Tom Baker comedy. But another part I did find questionable in the story was when the Doctor actually meets Erato for the first time in the pit, and he was trying to like communicate with it, and he was ended up trying to like pleasure it, and Tom Baker was like literally like having a laugh in the story because obviously Erato looked like a green, pardon my language, green cock and balls, and he had like an arm that looked very fat, like, and obviously had like he looked like a big blob that looked like balls, and then the doctor was pretty much like suckling on it, and that was just that was just so weird. And I wonder how the hell that actually got past the BBC and how they thought that was inappropriate at all. But hey, that's the 70s for you. I think that Lala Ward did a good job in the story as well. And actually, she had a fair bit to do, and this is actually the first story she filmed as Romana. But obviously, this story was written for Mary Tam's Romana, so you do see a lot of the characteristics that is associated with the first Romana, such as like the snarkiness and the dressing as well. How the first Romana dresses, like the white dress which the first Romana is associated with, but the second Romana she pretty much wears outfits that the Doctor would usually wear, with the exception of the City of Death, where she pretty much decides to walk around in like a Catholic schoolgirl for some odd reason. But hey, and actually Lalo didn't really like filming this story because she thought that this story was very much there's too much like for Layla for Mary Tam, and but I did think she did do a very good job in the story. But at the same time, I do think that having like a change of it was like a bit of a personality transplant for this Romana. It was a bit odd, but I think the writers could have at least changed the story up a bit to try and match the first to match the second Romana's characteristics, not just having leaving the first Romana's characteristics in the story whatsoever. But I do think she did do a very good job. I really like the part when the bandits caught Romana and she pretty much threatened to kill them, and that was out of character, yes, but the other one actually made it look good, and she looked quite menacing, looked serious as well. I think they could have given the second Romana a bit more of a serious side, but I do like how Romana is pretty much starting to pick up from the Doctor, and she was pretty much assisting and aiding in giving the Doctor the plans on trying to stop Cloris from being destroyed. And I really liked how Kanan was using this plot of the story. Kanan actually does get a new voice actor as John Leeson doesn't return for this season, and he's voiced by David Braley. I don't think he's as good as John Leeson, but he doesn't actually because Braley doesn't actually capture the charm that John Leeson is able to capture as K9. But I do like Braley as well. But I think he's pretty much. But Kanan is pretty much. Sorry, but Kanan is pretty much ordered around by Adrasta for most of the story and Romana. But he does get some quite get a few badass moments, like gunning down some of the bandits and some of Adrasta's gods as well. I also like at the end of part one, he's attacked by the Wolverines and the Doctor Romano pretty much assumed that he's dead, even though he pretty much malfunctioned. Our side characters. First off, we had Corella. She was Adrasta's right hand woman, and she was very wary of the Doctor, Kanan, and Romana, and of course Erato. After Adrasta was killed, she pretty much decided to make a run for it, and pretty much decided to usurp the leader Torium, becoming one of the leader of the bandits in exchange for gold, in exchange for all the metals that they wanted. And she does this by killing Tori. She does have a very good one-liner saying, after she killing him, saying something about the last 6 inches in you or something like that. That was quite badass, and I think she was a very good character. I think she was one of the strongest side characters of the story. But obviously, her alliance pretty much is unfruitful because the Doctor orders K9 to destroy the metals that they were able to collect, that the bandits were able to collect. And we also have Erato. He is the eponymous creature from the pit. He was an ambassador from the planet Tithonius, and Tithonus had a shortage of metal, so he came to Chloris to make an agreement with Adrasta to trade chlorophyll for some metal. But she trapped him in the pit for 15 years, and because she didn't want to give up her monopoly, and he also came in the egg that the Doctor found in the first story, and he actually told, and he wasn't actually able to communicate properly without he wasn't able to communicate properly because he had this mantle thing that Adrasta pretty much had in her room, in her throne room, I think the communicator thing actually hypnotized some of the bandits to bring it down to the pit, which allowed him to communicate with others, and he pretty much took the voices of whoever touched the thing next, like the thing in the middle. He pretty much used the Doctor's voice, Romano's voice, Adrasta's voice, and even K9's voice for some very odd reason. During the 15 years that Rata was in the pit, he was able to communicate with the people on his own planet to form a neutron star, which would collide with the star of Chloris, which would eventually have destroyed Chloris itself. And actually, Rata wasn't actually evil, and he was actually trapped by Adrasta, and she was pretty much using him as a horror story for some sorts for people who would actually like betray her or fail her. But obviously, Erato didn't really eat the humans, so he was just because if they saw him, they pretty much died of shock or he would accidentally like crush them to death. Because Erato only eats minerals and metal, which he didn't really have enough of. Even though he looked very inappropriate, but he did play a vital part in the story, which was quite cool to be honest. And we also had the swordsman or the swordsmaster. I can't remember exactly what his name was, but he wasn't actually given a name. He usually just called the swordmaster. He was Adrasta's swordmaster, and he was pretty much the first one to turn his back on Adrasta when the truth came out about what she did to Arata was revealed. After the day was saved by the Doctor and the Chloris was saved, he pretty much becomes the leader of Chloris and pretty much finalizes the agreement between Chithonius and Chloris with the metal and the chlorophyll. He was an alright character. And we also had Organon. He was an astrologer, a bad astrologer. He was because he was thrown into the pit because he refused to tell Adrasta who was coming to the stars. He's very much like if someone was to watch this story now, especially if they were like very into the astrology and stuff like that, they were pretty much like Organon because he wasn't a very good astrologer, but he was very interested in like star signs and stuff like that, and he was very. He was trying to get the Doctor's star sign, but the Doctor says that his star sign was born under computers and stuff on the Gallifrey, which was quite funny. And he was attacked by Corella in part 4, because she stole the community. She stole one of the components of the ship that was used to send that Arato used to transport in. I found him quite funny. He had a very good rapport to the Doctor, and we had Torfin. He was the leader of the bandits, and the main bandits that were focused on was Eidu and Ainu. They were pretty much in search for metals for wealth, and they pretty much had their own side plot, which pretty much played no relevance into the story until they reached Adrasta's castle when they found the communicator and they were hypnotized into bringing the communicator down into the pit. Torvin was later killed by Corella, but I thought Torvin was a good character as well as Ainu and Edu. They were okay characters, as even they didn't do much because I think one of them actually wanted to steal the communicator, but he was eventually convinced not to. But they were alright characters, so to speak. And our villain of the story was Lady Adrasta. She was the ruler of Chloris, and she pretty much ruled with an iron fist, and she threw people into the pit where Erato was trapped. If people failed her, they opposed her, including one of her engineers, which we see in the story. She was the one that was responsible for trapping Erato in the pit because she didn't want to lose her monopoly of metals, so Erato was the only one that knew of the proposed trade, made for 15 years, and when the truth came about what she did to Erato was revealed, she was pretty much killed by the Wolverines and Erato, which pretty much caused her to disintegrate. And I thought she was a very good villain, a very interesting villain, so to speak. Probably one of the more interesting villains of this season. And she was very hammy, and Mara Francis did a very good job. And and Adrasta actually reminded me of Margaret Thatcher, who was the UK Prime Minister at the time the story aired. And I think making her very much like Margaret Thatcher quite was quite obvious, and I think it was quite intentional as well because I'm not going to go political here because Margaret Thatcher she wasn't a very good prime minister to some and I think that's what they were going forward in this story. So I think the faults of the creature from the pit, not as many as the ones I mentioned before, but I think one of the main ones is how Romana 2 was very much like Mary Thames Romana, and it was very it was very obvious out of character move for this Romana, but it oddly worked. But I don't think they could have at least explained why she was like very hostile. Maybe it's the fact that it was an in-story explanation of why she's a bit more like the first Romana in comparison to the second one, but I don't know why. I think in my head, kind of she got a bit intimidated by Adrasta or something like that. Also, Arata looked very weird, but I think that's just an unfortunate accident. And I thought the part two cliffhanger when Naruto attacked the Doctor looked quite strange for some very odd reason. But hey, can't please everyone at the end of the day. So to conclude this review, I think the creature from the pit is very much a hidden gem from the Tom Baker era. It's a fun watch, and I think that it deserves a bit more love, and I gave the story an 8 out of 10. My next review will be The Nightmare of Eden, so look out for that one. Thanks for watching this review. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already, and follow me on the social media websites linked in the description below. Until then, see you later.